When we first made contact with humanity, we were astounded. After all, it's not every day that an interplanetary government makes such a colossal error, missing an entire sentient species within our own territory. It may have been a relatively unimportant, undeveloped expanse of space, but considering the volume of radio signals these humans were broadcasting into the void with reckless abandon, our leaders had no excuse whatsoever. The answer to how we'd missed them could wait, the humans could not. They had already deciphered our language and were attempting to establish communication with one of our colony worlds, which they had apparently been observing for approximately one of their years. Fortunately, the galactic bureaucracy maintained protocols for such situations, though these were typically reserved for primitive species finally discovering faster-than-light travel. 100 light-year sphere around their homeworld was designated as their buffer zone. Unfortunately, roughly 30% of that territory belonged to Karen Space, but we'll address that catastrophe later. Once our diplomats established contact with this new species, we discovered even greater surprises regarding their appearance and behavior. Earth, it turned out, existed at the very upper limit of the gravitational spectrum theorized capable of producing spacefaring life. Indeed, if their gravity had been any stronger, their early space flight attempts would never have achieved orbit, and they would likely have abandoned the endeavor entirely, as we'd witnessed with several other species unless they received uplift assistance. Rarely does any race accept the responsibility of uplifting such gravitationally challenged species. Allow me to elaborate for those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting humans. Most high-gravity sapient species measure roughly half the size of humans at their largest, relying on intelligence and superior numbers to solve problems collectively and compete with larger predators. The humans, however, defied this pattern. While not particularly large, their average height of 2 meters falls just under half the galactic average. They possessed remarkable strength compared to other high-gravity sapients, and monstrous power compared to typical galactic species. Furthermore, humans moved with peculiar efficiency. After evolving under such intense gravity, their motions appeared quick and mechanical, almost robotic compared to other races. This earned them a reputation as bumbling strongmen throughout the galaxy, a stereotype reinforced by their seemingly boundless optimism and unshakable composure in every situation except discussions of their past. It was rather endearing, honestly, watching human diplomats blush and fidget as they described what they considered a shamefully violent history of warfare and conflict. They appeared so mortified by their past that several of our diplomats couldn't help but laugh as they explained to increasingly relieved humans that engaging in a few wars didn't make them monsters among galactic civilizations. The stereotype persisted partly because humans possessed an unusual tendency to solve problems through brute force. Human engineers routinely employed what they called percussive maintenance when stationed aboard ships and stations. As one colleague aptly noted, the only surprising thing about watching a human smash delicate machinery to repair it is that the equipment actually starts functioning afterward. The more we learned about humans, the more amusing they became. They quickly became the subject of countless jokes throughout the bureaucracy. When the humans inevitably discovered this, our government braced for the worst possible retaliation. Part of the reason for so many human-centered jokes was that we remained somewhat intimidated by these monstrously strong apes. However, the humans, to borrow one of their own expressions, didn't give a damn. They laughed along and even contributed jokes at their own expense. While this experience helped alleviate many species' fears about humans, it also generated new good-natured humor. One popular joke suggested that if any species attempted to invade human space, the humans would surrender their homeworld without resistance. For the following years, humans contentedly expanded within their designated buffer zone, establishing mining stations, colonies, and trade agreements with remarkable efficiency. Humans proved to be natural laborers, possessing average galactic intelligence, which, to their credit, was nothing to dismiss, combined with tremendous strength and seemingly inexhaustible energy reserves. This allowed them to produce resources and consumer goods at unprecedented rates. It appeared we were witnessing the dawn of an economic golden age for humanity, especially given the exceptional quality of their manufactured products. Unfortunately, their most lucrative trade agreement collapsed spectacularly. Early in establishing interspecies commerce, humans had signed an extraordinarily profitable deal with the Saruk stellar gospel, a deeply religious avian species that had been peacefully attempting to convert their galactic neighbors with minimal success. This trade agreement formed the backbone of the human economy, providing resources necessary for unprecedented production scales in human commerce. What happened next constituted a minor tragedy. One human leader was caught by a RIM system tabloid describing the Saruk as the Jehovah's Witnesses of the galaxy, expressing occasional annoyance with their persistent evangelism despite acknowledging them as excellent trade partners. When this article reached the Saruk High Speaker, she became outraged and immediately declared that all Saruk trade with such a godless and ungrateful species would cease immediately. She contacted her diplomats within the bureaucracy and initiated a trade embargo. When the embargo was presented for other species to sign, we all expected the humans to be furious, as this would surely devastate their economy for years. But once again, the humans didn't give a damn. They looked at each other, nodded, and replied very well before departing. With that, the war began, and humanity was losing catastrophically. Their fleet surrendered light year after light year, while those massive ships they had constructed remained mysteriously absent. We assumed they were guarding colonies from surprise attacks, a belief that lasted only until the first human colony world was reached by the Karen fleet. The humans offered no resistance whatsoever. Not a single military vessel existed in the system, and as Karens began orbital bombardment unopposed, the rest of the bureaucracy was outraged. How could humans abandon their own people to orbital attack? For their part, human representatives remained passive and unmoved by our outrage and demands for action. They calmly reminded us that they simply lacked the military power to repel the Karens and had requested our assistance before the war began. That silenced us. Their words cut deeply while our protests left them unfazed. It seemed they didn't even care about their own people. Then an outraged transmission arrived from the Karen Navy. The humans had completely evacuated the entire colony. The Karens had wasted thousands of tons of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons on an empty world. Shortly thereafter, an even more furious transmission reached us. In retaliation for rendering their colony uninhabitable for years due to radiation and biological agents the Karens had rained from orbit, humans launched pinpoint biological strikes on every major Karen ranch world. The horrific cocktail of viruses, bacteria, parasites, and even prion that humans deployed rendered the livestock, upon which the strictly carnivorous Karens depended, both inedible and lethal. In a single operation, the Karens lost over 90% of their food production. With the embargo we had all but been coerced into signing months prior, we were powerless to intervene. In 1 hour, humans had doomed billions of Karens to death by starvation, without giving a single damn about the implications. Human representatives merely smiled with grim satisfaction when they heard the Infinity Admiral's outraged cries. The Karens naturally attempted retaliation, striking at human agricultural worlds, but here they encountered their first genuine resistance. Humans defended their agricultural centers more fiercely than their industrial facilities. They fought where they held the greatest advantage, utilizing their immense strength and compact size to construct boarding craft by the thousands. Karen's superior numbers and technology became irrelevant if they couldn't repel human boarders. The Karens adapted quickly, rigging their ships to explode before humans could seize control and turn their weapons against the rest of the fleet. It took months and thousands of human and Karen ships and lives, but the Karens eventually succeeded in decimating human agricultural capabilities as well. However, omnivorous humans possessed the advantage of growing food in hydroponic bays aboard their vessels. Not only did humans biologically bomb their own agricultural worlds before they could be captured, but they slaughtered and burned their livestock in fires visible from orbit before Karen soldiers could land. At this point, the Karen population was beginning to starve. Reports from our agents in Karen space painted a grim picture. Riots were breaking out, and several sectors had begun resorting to cannibalism. In retaliation, the Infinity Admiral staged a public execution on their homeworld of human prisoners, mostly farmers who had volunteered to remain behind on agricultural worlds to maintain operations as long as possible. The humans, characteristically, didn't give a damn. They offered their deepest condolences to the families of those who had volunteered to stay behind, but the war continued relentlessly. We asked if humans needed to purchase food for their people, but they declined. Humans understood that an interplanetary species could easily produce enough food to crash the entire galactic economy if they chose, which is exactly what they had done. While evacuating their worlds and constructing their fleet, they had produced, preserved, and packaged trillions of tons of food, enough for their entire race to never experience hunger for centuries, if not millennia. Much of this stockpile remains even today. Speaking of evacuations, most of those massive ships we had observed under construction were ARC ships, enormous vessels packed with billions of civilians and enough food to last centuries each. All humanity had to do was wait. The Karen Infinity Admiral, recognizing that his empire was crumbling and victory was impossible, issued another enraged decree. The full force of the Karen Infinite Armada descended upon the Sol system in a weeks-long battle that concluded with the Karens launching a gravitational catalyst at Earth. The gravity waves produced by this weapon cracked the planet into 12 pieces. When news of Earth's destruction reached the bureaucracy floor, we witnessed something unprecedented. For the first time since first contact, humans gave a damn. To say it was unnerving would be a massive understatement. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a human, a full-blooded Earth-born human, was observed caring deeply about something. However, they weren't outraged as we expected. They didn't call for blood or cry out for genocide. They were devastated. They wept for the loss of their cradle world, a catastrophe that would require centuries to overcome. But even as they grieved, a dangerous determination began to grip them, and it terrified every one of us. In that moment, we understood that humans would see this conflict through to its conclusion, and the result would be far from pleasant. The final gambit. After Earth's destruction, the human fleet began systematically retaking worlds, pushing the exhausted and starving Karens back to the edge of their original borders. Only then did the Karen government call for surrender. Their fleet was in ruins, limping along on what little food they could synthesize aboard their remaining ships. The same two humans, High General Felicia Aritis and High Admiral Simon Bacall, met with a withered shadow of what had once been the hulking Karen Infinity Admiral. All races except the humans looked down at the deteriorated Karen with pity as he spoke, already knowing what the stone-faced humans would say in response to his unspoken question. "Humans?" the Admiral began, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "You have burned my empire from within. The last time I spoke with you, I declared that we would come at you with claws unblunted and implored you to do the same. I can safely say this was the greatest mistake in my people's history." The weary Karen swallowed dryly as he forced himself to continue. "Now that you have pushed us back to our borders and our defeat is inevitable, I must perform my final duty as leader of my people. The Karen Infinite Armada formally declares surrender." The defeat was evident in his eyes as he removed his ceremonial blade and offered it to the two humans. "Please, I know we don't deserve it after what we did to your cradle world, but I cannot bear to watch more of my people starve. Please show them mercy." The silence was deafening. Looks of pity on every sapient face except the still stoic humans deepened, and sadness at knowing the Karen people were about to be exterminated drove more than one representative to tears. "We, on behalf of the human Emirate Republic, accept your surrender," High General Aritis declared, making every non-human jaw drop in shock as she stepped forward and took his blade. "Your lands will become our lands, your people will become our people, and we will treat them exactly as we treat our own. You, however, will be publicly executed for ordering Earth's destruction," High Admiral Bacall added, making the Karen sigh and nod acceptance. "If this is the price I must pay for my people to live, then so be it. I was prepared for this," the former ruler said, standing proudly as two human guards approached to escort him away. "Might I address my people before I go?" he asked. "There will be plenty of time for that later," High Admiral Bacall replied, increasing the room's confusion. "We will need your assistance in saving as many of your people as possible. As much as it pains me to say, your execution will be postponed for months, if not years." A hint of annoyance colored the Admiral's voice as the Karen was led from the room, followed quickly by the two human leaders, both wearing satisfied smiles. The annexation. The humans then invaded former Karen space, peacefully. They possessed more preserved and frozen meat than they could ever consume and ensured the starving Karens received as much food as was safe for them to eat. Within a year, humans had established supply lines throughout completely annexed Karen territory and prevented any further starvation among their new citizens. Then humans released more biological agents onto former Karen ranch worlds. But this time, the cocktail of biologically engineered organisms was designed to eliminate the previous bioweapons that had destroyed Karen livestock. They also provided the Karens with comprehensive vaccines for themselves and their livestock in case the counteragents proved incomplete. It took several additional years, but humans and Karens together restored their space to full self-sufficiency. As for the Karens, integration into the human Emirate Republic proceeded smoothly. Karens were raised believing might makes right. It violated their honor to disrespect those they considered superior. They understood that humans could have exterminated them completely and respected them for showing mercy. It also helped that Karens had no concept of sports beyond public duels, which became non-lethal and made for wonderful entertainment. Various human sports provided Karens with perfect outlets for their warlike nature. Additionally, having their former ruler alongside human leadership, advising his people to trust the humans, proved invaluable. Speaking of the former Infinity Admiral, he received a permanent stay of execution after human citizens everywhere threatened to riot. The humans actually decided to spare the life of the being responsible for their cradle world's complete and irreversible destruction. At that point, nothing surprised us anymore. Once they finished rebuilding their territory, humans quickly filled the power vacuum the Karens had left behind, using resources and technology from the dismantled Karen government to rapidly rebuild a grand fleet manned by both Karens and humans, while initiating an economic golden age that continues today. The truth revealed. Years later, I asked the human who had been their leader during the war about why humanity had attempted the largest siege war in galactic history. "We knew the Karens wanted to humiliate us," he explained with the same deadpan attitude one might use to discuss an unremarkable breakfast. "They wanted to maintain their status as the galaxy's big bad bullies and gloat as they took Earth. So we took a gamble. We bet that the Karens were producing only the bare minimum food needed to feed their population. Like the isolationists, they don't export anything but mining explosives, so there's no need to produce much more food than their public required." I then asked him about the only time I'd ever witnessed a human care. I asked about Earth. He sighed and took a drink from his glass. "We were prepared for losses, but I'm sure I don't need to tell you how much a species' first world means to them," he said, his voice hollow and sad. He sighed again and, as though discussing a concession in a business contract, had the audacity to tell me it was an acceptable loss. I couldn't help myself. Here I thought I had actually witnessed humans caring deeply about something, but in reality, it was merely them coming to terms with what they believed was inevitable. As undiplomatic as it was, I remarked about his species' unnatural ability to never truly care about anything. He laughed, and it was then that I learned about the creature humans call the honey badger, and everything made perfect sense. The humans knew they couldn't defeat the Karens in direct combat. Nobody could have. Their military might matched the entire galactic bureaucracy combined. But humans didn't need to fight fair. They were the only species in the galaxy that could wage war without giving a single damn about conventional limitations. So it remains that nobody has ever seen humans truly care about anything since first contact. And with the power they now possess, I doubt they ever will.